Hi-Rez has responded to all of the outrage they've been receiving the past few days. Maybe a little on the late side, but it is here. Also, it is relatively positive going forward. To shortly sum it up, before I get into all the specifics, is that they have decreased the costs and grind significantly, and are working on some other options to get the essence that aren't as RNG. One thing that is clear in the response is that they are committed to going ahead with the essence system, even with all that stink attached to it. It is kind of what most of us had expected, and I'll talk about my personal grievances at this point in the conclusions, as they have improved things a lot, and I do think it deserves to get out there, and they also show that they're willing to change things. Especially after all the coverage outside the Paladins community that has been quite negative. Anyway, let's get to the nitty gritty. One of the biggest complaints was a huge cost of legendary cards relative to the amounts of essence you would acquire. Before, all legendary cards would have cost 18,000 each, and now it is reduced to 12,000. Still quite high, but what this means is all non-default legendaries go from costing 729,000 essence to 528,000 essence in total if you buy all the cards. It is a big decrease, and like I said before, you probably only need a third to 2/5 of that, and as you'll build up the champions you regularly play for each class, and that's around 180,000 essence, and comparing that to what it would have been before, it would have been quite a bit more. Obviously there are also better and worse legendaries as the meta changes, so you might end up needing to buy more, and there are still going to be 10 champions coming out this year or so, and that's going to be 20 more cards to buy. But the point is, your grind for legendaries is a lot better than it was before. Another slash to the grind is they're increasing the pathetic 60 essence drop from duplicate common cards to 250. This is another huge increase which will generally lessen the grind, and estimates of surveyed players opening the chests earlier in the patch were that common cards made up 40% of the drops, so it's very important that they have increased essence rate for these ones, and with that 40% it means that you'll be getting a lot more in general. They have also said they are working on a disenchant system to allow players to get essence back from unwanted cards. Again, this isn't in yet, but could be key in making sure that there is a way to have more control over your grind than you did before, and it isn't just random, and was one of my major complaints. On new player progression, they have given a few more things. Firstly, they have increased the daily quest from 450 gold from 300, so each day you get 3, and it means you can just about buy a chest completing these 2 days in a row, with chests costing 2,500 gold. They've also stated that they intend to give essence to new players for completing achievements in the game, and it is something I always thought should have been rewarded and would be a good move. And they've also stated that they want to add more achievements, like a first custom loadout, which would give a higher essence drop. But again, this isn't in the game yet, and is a future feature, so who knows how it will turn out and how it will actually end up. And currently, there aren't that many achievements in the game to be completed, so how many there will actually be and how much of a constant grind this could be is questionable. However, generally, these are all steps in the right direction and have made the grind more realistic. And most importantly, Hi-Rez are willing to tweak the system and correct some of the values that were too high, and they state they definitely didn't intend to make the game inaccessible to new players. Now, one of my biggest complaints with this whole system and drama is that it wasn't thought out very well. It was pushed out and the maths had to be done by the community and outraged first, and a lot of the improvements they mention are still in development, and if it had come out later with some of these improvements, there might not have been all the outrage there is now. Like I said in my rant video, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and a lot of damage has been already done to the reputation of the game and its development. And I know a few people said I was stirring the pot, but I just wanted Hi-Rez to get the changes out as quickly as possible before everything exploded, which it has. So the problem in my opinion comes down partly to the whole early access beta stuff games are wearing as a cloak at the moment. But as the third most popular game on Steam, it has pretty much taken off at this point as a live game. I feel dropping new champions that need to be balanced is fine, the meta shifts, and that is the same with most games. Game modes are the same, like survival, and PvE mode can be tweaked and get better over time, but dropping something so fundamental into the game as this should have been thought out, tested, and drawn feedback back on more. Hell, we never got to the final PTS round that might have shown how broken the next iteration of the patch was. And the PTS is something they could really utilise more. Also, not to name them, but we fundamentally got to see the thought process of the development team in putting in the Essence system with some of their responses to critics in social media. They wanted to emulate systems like in games like Hearthstone, and fundamentally I think a card collecting game is, fundamentally about getting cards and has an established meta of purchasing and building decks, which I actually think isn't that great. However, Paladins first and foremost in my eyes is a first-person hero shooter and has elements of flair for champions and cards, but is more about the competitive 5v5 action and is affected by the cards balancing in the game. Certain combinations work and others don't, but especially as a shooter there is less tolerance to not being on an even playing field with your opponents. I do agree with Hi-Rez that initially new players won't be all too worried about the right builds and stuff like that as they are playing the game more than trying to be good at the game, but it is a bridging point of getting a new player to stay and become part of that game's consistent player base. And having such an RNG system in a competitive shooting game in its actual core gameplay mechanics is such a turn-off. Anyway, in conclusion, they have significantly improved the size of the grind by reducing it and are actively developing more consistent ways to get essence. However, I still think the essence system just shows an example of something being pushed out that wasn't ready. Also, fundamentally, the gold system wasn't broken, and if they wanted to increase the grind as it was low before, and as it was relatively low before, they could have reduced the gold earned, increased card costs, and the big one perhaps, giving something actually valuable to get with your gold, not just funneling it into another currency that has lower value and is spent on specific things. Finally, Joshino's word of the day is fundamentally. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section, like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and I'll see you all next time folks. Joshino.